Hey everyone, today we're asking the question of what if the survivors of Dead by Daylight were not in the realm, but instead in our position and playing the killers? And if so, which would they pick based on their lore and personality? Let's get into it. Starting off with Adam, I think he'd main Trapper. This is largely due to him seeming calculated and intelligent, and so he'd likely enjoy the Trapper's power. Partly I think he'd also sympathize with Evan as a character. Evan with a childhood broken by his lack of trust for others, and being bullied despite being a calm and reserved person prior. I think Adam would likely sympathize with this. So yeah, Trapper. For Jake, I get the feeling he would love to play the Wraith. He can be all off-grid even in trials. Jake's a survivalist, kind of has a similar look to the clothing or design of Wraith. There's also a strategic and sneak-related element to Wraith, which I also think makes sense for Jake. For Yui, Meg, and Claire, I was thinking possibly they'd go for a faster character like Hillbilly or Blight. Yui as a motorcyclist isn't going to want to slow down when it comes to games. In DBD, the closest you're getting to racing is the speedy Hillbilly. Meg, for similar reasons. I think even in the Entity's realm and when playing a game, should strive to be the fastest, and so opt for Hillbilly. Claire is kind of similar to Yui's reasoning. She likes motorbikes, and so I think the speedy chainsaw character makes the most sense for her also. Our one and only nurse main is going to be Fang. I can see Fang being a nurse main just because of her competitive nature. Fang is the person who's going to go the meta route if she's putting her time into a game, and as Nurse is the most powerful and a higher skill killer, I think she would definitely main Nurse. Lisa would maybe go for Nurse also, as the opposite of Fang, and likely having little knowledge of video games, but instead picking the Nurse for the name and visuals. Or maybe that would be too traumatizing after Silent Hill. For Shape, I'm saying Jane. This may seem like a strange pick. In fact, my initial thoughts were for a character like Trickster. As you know, Trickster talks loads in game, and Jane is a talk show host. He's also in the entertainment industry, and so is Jane. However, I consider that if Jane was going to sit down and play a game, we can probably presume that it's for some downtime. She's probably a bit sick of talking all day. So Myers seems like the perfect silent fit for Jane after a long day's work, opposing her constant human interaction with some evil within. I also think Tap would main Shape for the whole constant stakeout vibe. Viewing from a distance, gaining power before moving in is the kind of thing he would seem into. So I'm going to put Tap here too. I think Claudette would main Hag. There's a few reasons why I think this. First off, the tactical element is there. Claudette is said to be very smart in the lore, and so a more tactical killer would likely intrigue her more so. Also, the similarity between Claudette and Hag's ages, I think would lead to Claudette sympathizing with Hag as a character. Finally, I think Claudette would find the idea of the hexes and magic quite interesting and engaging, especially as she's more on the science side in the real world. This would be her chance to explore something a bit more fantastical. Maybe Ace would main Hag too, due to how luck plays a role in her backstory and the whole idea of making your own luck. Although I'm not quite sure if he would have the strategy or tactics to play Hag well, so I'm not too sure about that one. Leon, I'm thinking, might be a Huntress main. As someone who is competent with guns and weaponry and becomes an amazing agent in the later Resident Evil games, I can imagine him liking the precision needed for the Huntress, using his aim and skills to end chases quickly instead of engaging in the usual kind. Ash would of course immediately seek out a character with a chainsaw. My bet is on Bubba because I think he'd find him a little easier. I get the feeling that Ash isn't too versed in video games, so if he were to play DBD, he'd be a Bubba main. This is instead over Hillbilly, who's going to require a little more skill and control over movement. For Jill, I'm saying Pig. This is purely down to the fact that I think she'd be intrigued by the reverse bear traps themselves. With her interest in lockpicking, she could take interest in the jigsaw boxes and then bomb disposal, the reverse bear traps and the way they work. I think she would like to take up the other side to the things she is typically defusing or unlocking. Yeah, that's my reasoning I think for that one. For Dwight, I'm saying Clown. Through Dwight's whole vibe with all his costumes and different outfits, I think it's safe to say that he himself is a bit of a clown. The realm Joker as it were. I think a large element therefore when picking a main would be the outfits available, Clown having some of the funnier and brighter ones. Also Clown as a quite underused killer would likely appeal to Dwight's own underdog nature. Yunjin and Cheryl I'm saying are gonna main Spirit. Yunjin because of her self-preservation and getting by even at the expense of others, just like Spirit maids. No, but seriously, I think she would play Spirit as she's one of the stronger killers that provides one of the best advantages of little counterplay, which I think Yunjin would like. Cheryl, I think, would play Spirit because of her run-ins with the supernatural, and that Spirit is almost like what could have possibly happened to her if she hadn't survived Silent Hill. Cheryl would likely sympathize with Spirit, especially as she stated to work at a center for troubled youth. She would see the tragedy within Spirit, whereas Yunjin would be doing it for the competitive advantage. Nia, I'm saying, would be drawn to the Legion. As a teenager herself, and also pretty edgy, I believe she would think herself to fit right in alongside the Legion, and so like playing them in DBD. Both Legion and Nia also share a like for vandalism or tagging places, Nia with her tagging and Legion with the big mural they get painted in the ski lodge. Elodie I can imagine as a Plague main. Elodie is shown in her lore to be obsessed with ancient stuff, so I think Plague's whole vibe would be something she'd really like, as Plague is effectively an ancient person pulled into the present. So I think Plague's whole aesthetic would be something that would greatly draw Elodie. For Nancy and Jonathan, we have Ghostface. This may seem like an odd pick, but I can imagine Nancy and Jonathan taking on the role of a stealth killer, partly for the strategic element of Ghosty, but also his backstory being that he's a journalist. He's also big into pictures, which is something Jonathan also likes a lot. Are more methodical but also fun characters who I can see Nancy going with, so I think Ghostface fits that well. Jonathan would just run him for the Mori. For Steve, Jeff, and Ace, I think they would all main the Demogorgon. All three are pretty chilled out and seem like if they were to play games, they would do it in a casual and relaxed way, and what better way to do that than to play Demo. Maybe this wouldn't work out so well for Steve due to his previous encounters with it, but I do think he's the kind of person who might have enough intrigue to want to see what it's like from the other side. I consider that Ace may want a more luck-based character, but I don't think he'd have the effort to play someone like Trapper. But hey, possibly. Chris, I'm thinking, would be an Oni main. Oni being a big strong guy who's very skilled at fighting, and Chris basically being the same, just in a wildly different setting. I think Oni would be preferable over the other tanky characters like Nemesis though, because Oni has some strategy behind him too, which I think would appeal more to Chris as a STARS member. I'm not too sure about a character like Sybil, so possibly she would fit into this same kind of thing, and just go for the character who's strong but requires strategy also. Bill, I'm saying, would go with Deathslinger, purely for the gun. I was thinking originally maybe he'd go for a killer like Nemesis or Oni, but then I thought probably not. They might give him tank flashbacks. Deathslinger I think makes the most sense, as a similarly feared, gun-wielding, lone wanderer just trying to get by and do his best. They both had leg injuries too, so I guess there's that. Laurie I think would main Pyramid Head as the only character who is more powerful than Myers. I think she would like playing him for this reason mainly. We know that from the 2018 Halloween that she's up for preparing and planning for the best possible strategy, so I think going with the most powerful character in the lore would be her kind of thing, you know, one-upping Myers. For Quentin, I'm saying the Blight, and this is purely due to him being obsessive and alert a lot like Quentin. Yeah, that's really my only connection. But I get the feeling that after his experiences with Freddy and the Dream World, Blight is the kind of guy who shares Quentin's wavelength. Both are alert and constantly wired. For Serena we have the twins. This is mainly as Serena seems like the kind of person who even in video games would greatly sympathize with characters who've had a pretty rough time in their lives. Twins is the clearest case of that, as they suffer a lot for what they don't really deserve, leading them to take things into their own hands and fight for themselves. This is basically what Zarina does too, just with a camera and through journalism. She'd probably also likely sympathize with them when it comes to their mother, who was killed unjustly, like her father who was killed by a gang. Kate I'm placing as a Trickster main, for the visuals, high energy, and love for music. I personally don't think Kate is the kind of person to be too drawn to video games, but if she was, I think she'd lean more into something familiar. Also, Trickster has some of the best music in the game, in the main menus and such. Especially as Trickster's music is so different to hers, I think it would interest her more so. David I think would be a Nemesis main. This is pretty straightforward reasoning, but basically being a big guy with massive fists and going around punching people seems like the kind of thing that David would be pretty into. Felix I thought might be quite drawn to the Cenobite as someone who loves design and architecture. The visuals of the Cenobite or Pinhead are some of the best in the game, and I think Felix would have a certain admiration for it and enjoy the visual and aesthetic aspects. Also, the power is something I could see him liking as a fairly technical one that requires precision. Alright, well that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and do let me know which killer you think each of the survivors would main. Thanks, and goodbye.